the baby going to do with a bar of gold? Or spices, or incense? Though as inappropriate as those presents seem, at least they're better than the gift of a kid giving you a private drum concert. As cute as the little drummer boy seems, I've never been pregnant, but I know how much I enjoy the sound of children banging on drums now, and I can't imagine just having given birth would add to the experience. Seriously though, if I were the one in charge of picking out gifts for the Holy Family, and I'm pretty good at picking out gifts, if I do say so myself, I would have brought a casserole. I would have brought a car seat, or I guess a donkey seat. One of those with a little cup holder and a mobile that could keep the kid distracted. And I would have offered to clean the stable for them before I left. But no, these wise men from the East come all this way to give a baby a bunch of very expensive but not very fun gifts. I hope the weirdness of these presents, or really the weirdness of any of the things we encounter in the Bible, and there is a lot of weirdness in there, I hope it always confuses you a little bit. I hope it always makes you wonder and ask questions, because there's always something interesting to learn from the weird stuff. But let's take a step back for a second. Who are these magi anyway? Thank you for asking, Juanita. I was just about to get there. Here's what we actually know from the text of the Bible itself about the wise men. They came from the East. That's it. That's all we know. So by that standard, being a Pittsburgh native, I technically qualify, as do the Hannons and the Hamlins. It can be further inferred, though, from the historical context and other details in the story that they were probably astrologers, or at least people that sought wisdom from looking at the stars. They were Gentiles, and therefore they weren't very well versed in Jewish tradition, and they were probably from Persia, which is present-day Iraq and Iran. So sorry, you guys. I guess that disqualifies us after all. Later, much later, 200 years later, a church father named Tertullian suggested that these men were kings because the Old Testament had predicted that kings would come and worship the Christ, although the Bible never says they were kings. And Tertullian also concluded that there were 3 of them because there were 3 gifts, although that isn't in the text either. There could have been at least 2, because they were plural, and up to 1 million of them. We don't know. And in the 6th century, someone decided that their names were Melchior, Balthazar, and Gaspar for no reason at all that I can discern, other than they sound cool, I guess. So here we have this story Matthew tells us about these mysterious wise men of unknown number and their well-intentioned but very weird gifts. So I'm sure you want to know what these gifts mean. And on the surface, yes, these are strange, very strange gifts for a baby, but they aren't all that strange when you look at them not as gifts for a baby, but as gifts for the Son of God. And they're valuable not so much monetarily, but in terms of what they symbolize about who Jesus is and what he came to do. The first gift is gold, and that symbolizes the king aspect of who Jesus is, that Jesus, not you, Herod, is king. The average person didn't just walk around with gold in their pocket. Gold was something kept in the royal treasury, something used either as an ornate decoration to show that the person or thing displaying it is important, or something that's used for huge purchases like the dowry of a neighboring country's princess, or a massive building project, or the supplies necessary to run an entire military. Gold was quite literally fit for a king and not really for anybody else. The second gift was frankincense. Some translations just say incense. Same difference, because both symbolize the priestly role of Jesus. In Jewish tradition, the priests would burn incense in the temple as part of their offering of worship to God. The priests were also the ones responsible for making sacrifices in the temple to obtain forgiveness for the community's sins, and Jesus, for us, is the ultimate priest. The book of Hebrews puts it like this. For this reason, Jesus had to be made like his brothers and sisters in every way, in order that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in service of God, and that he might make atonement for the sins of the people. Jesus is a priest in his death, in that he, in his death and forever after, is on our side. Jesus is going before God on our behalf, acting as the source of our atonement and forgiveness and reconciliation between us and our Maker and us and each other. And finally, that brings us to the third gift, myrrh. Myrrh is a spice which at that time was almost exclusively used to prepare dead bodies for burial. Super morbid gift for a baby. At least we might see it that way, but I don't think Jesus would have seen it as morbid. I'm reminded of the story later in the gospel of the woman who breaks open the jar of alabaster and spills out this expensive perfume that she had purchased to prepare herself for burial. And she uses it, all of it, to anoint Jesus. Everybody else in the room had a problem with what she was doing. I might have had a problem with what she was doing. But Jesus saw it as a beautiful act of worship. It's not as if Jesus didn't know his fate. It's not like he shied away from dying. Perhaps accepting and feeling grateful for the sacrifice of Christ rather than trying to ignore it or soften it or explain it away. Maybe that's the best way we can honor that decision to die. To look it in the face, to accept the horror of it and just say, thank you. There's a reason we call this time of year, we call the reading of this story the Epiphany. An epiphany, after all, is another word for a moment of enlightenment and realization and inspiration. The gifts of the wise men serve as a message to us. That this baby is not an ordinary baby, and that if we open our eyes to the truth beyond the way things appear on the surface, we'll see that God has great things in mind indeed. The Magi were the last people that should have recognized Jesus for who he was. They weren't Jewish. They weren't from around there. They were total outsiders, but they get it. When nobody else in the room got it, the woman with the alabaster jar did. When no one else understands there are people, and they're the wrong people, but still they see and know that Jesus is Emmanuel, God with us. Somehow, some way they recognize Jesus when others can't. When Herod wanted Jesus dead, the wise men gave him the best of everything they had. When his own hometown couldn't see him as anything more than that carpenter's kid, the Magi bowed down to him as Lord and God. So don't you ever think that anyone is the wrong person for God to use. Actually, as a matter of fact, do think that, I dare you. Because God always seems to be using the people that nobody else will believe in. The story ends with the wise men going home by a different road than the one they came in on. And I think that's probably true on more than one level. Yeah, it's geographically true. They were trying to avoid Herod, but I think it's also spiritually true. I don't think you can walk away from an encounter like that the same way you walk into an encounter like that. May we, like the Magi, encounter the voice of God in people and places we would never expect it to be. And may it send us off along a different road. I invite you to join in singing our hymn of response.